So last week I posted a sweep picking exercise for you guys to try. Now I will admit it was on the advanced side for sure. One thing to keep in mind though with these advanced exercises that I sometimes post, the point is for all players of all levels that you can take any small snippet or any small part of that whole exercise and practice it as a smaller, easier exercise than the entire thing. But still today we're gonna kind of back up a little bit and get to the, introduction or the mechanics of sweep picking. It's a technique that I'm asked about pretty often, and a lot of guitar players are always kind of interested into sweep picking. It looks cool, it sounds cool. It can be very melodic sounding because most of the time you're using arpeggios, and it's a really cool technique to incorporate into your playing. Sweep picking always looks so much easier than it actually is. And I always tell students that even though it became one of my stronger techniques, it actually is the technique that I think took me the longest to get comfortable with, to get fluent with. So honestly, with sweep picking, I think the main thing needed is just patience of just day in, day out practicing, doing it slowly, making sure it's clean, and eventually over time you get it smoother and faster. So the basics of sweep picking is that it's kind of a motion in between strumming and picking. So if I'm going through an arpeggio shape, I'm not individually picking the notes like this, or even alternate picking. You can see my hands kind of stabbing at each note, like down picks. Now obviously it's also not a strum because you're going to strum all the strings at the same time. Doesn't work. Sweep picking is in the middle where it's one smooth motion through the strings. That's why it can be so deceiving, because when you watch players like Jason Becker or Synyster Gates or these guys do these crazy sweeping arpeggios, the fretting hand looks just wild, just going up and down these arpeggios. And then the right hand, or the picking hand I should say, is always just like this. It looks as smooth as butter, no friction, no effort. It looks super easy to do. But to get that synchronization and that control is really, really hard. So we're going to start off with a little mini arpeggio shape to practice this motion. And it's a pretty common arpeggio, pretty common shape. A little A minor arpeggio there. Now you will see different approaches when it comes to the highest note of the arpeggio, and I'm going to explain my approach and why I do this. Some players at the top of that arpeggio will do a hammer-on and pull-off. And yes, sure, that's, one fewer picks and it might be a little bit easier, but I do find what can happen is you hear a lot of players end up going like this. And it's actually hard to control your hammer-on and pull-off in the same time as your sweep picking. Now, the other reason that I always pick the top note of the arpeggio is 9 times out of 10, if not more, that note is where the beat lands. So that's where you want to feel the beat. So I want to have that accent, that punctuation on that beat. I'm exaggerating just a little bit there just so you can hear it. But again, it gives you that better sense of timing and that punctuation on that beat. So with sweep picking arpeggios, I'm going down all the way and then I'm switching direction at that highest note. That's the first upstroke. Then I pull off back to that 12 and continue up. Switching direction again on the next beat, which is where I go back to the downstroke at the top of the arpeggio. Now we're doing a small 3-string arpeggio here, but the same thing applies when I'm doing a larger 5-string arpeggio or anything like that, is I start on the beat with the first note down, and I don't switch direction until I hit that highest note. You can hear again that accent, that punctuation on the highest note on the beat, which is most of the time where the beat is within these arpeggios. So how to practice this: take it nice and slow. Again, it takes so much patience to get good and fluent and controlled with sweep picking. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are in a rush to try to practice the technique, a lot of the times you hear this kind of like empty arpeggio. And what I mean is you hear like the first note and the last note. And it's basically a rake in the middle versus an actual articulated arpeggio. So do it nice and slow. Get it controlled, get the picking hand pushing and pulling through the strings. Be careful not to have an individual picking technique both ways, but have that nice, smooth, controlled motion. You can practice this to a metronome, of course, to test your consistency. Usually arpeggios are played in triplets. That just works out the best for these shapes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But take it nice and slow. Make sure it's really, really clean. Quick side note is with the muting of the strings, like a lot of techniques when I'm playing these arpeggios, I'm using my fretting hand to mute under the notes, and then I'm using my picking hand to mute above the notes. So basically when I'm leaving the string, going down to the next string for that note, I'm using my right hand wherever's comfortable. I'm usually using kind of like the palm, and sometimes even for sweep picking at least, sometimes closer to the thumb, to kind of mute the string that I just left, because you won't really be able to do it with your fretting hand. So I'm going to leave a couple arpeggio shapes in the tabs below, and then also with kind of a final arpeggio practice that you can use. Again, I love using arpeggios in my playing, both rhythm and lead, because since an arpeggio is just a broken down chord, you're just, again, taking the notes of an A minor chord and playing them one at a time. When you go through arpeggio sequences, it just naturally sounds very musical and can sound very beautiful. So it's worth the practice. It sounds awesome for that reason. And just be patient with the technique. Take it nice and slow, nice, smooth, controlled push and pull motions. Use a metronome to track your progress and your consistency, and you will get there eventually. So have fun with that. And as always, keep up the practice.